the reincarnation of Zu Shua. It began with a woman named Lin Wong Yao, 37 years old, a wife, and by all accounts, an ordinary villager. She had been sick, bedridden with fever. Everyone expected the worst. But what no one could have expected was that when she died, it would not be the end of her story. Good evening, and welcome to Midnight Horror Society. Here we take the strange and the chilling and tell them slowly, like whispers meant for the night. Before we begin, take a second to like the video and subscribe only if you feel at home here. In the comments, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always comforting to see how many of us are awake together in the dark. So dim the lights. Let the sound of the night, rain, crickets, or just the quiet of your room settle around you. Get comfortable. And when you're ready, let's step into tonight's story. It was a humid evening in a small Taiwanese village. The shutters of the Wong family's house were closed, though faint lines of light slipped through the cracks. Inside, the living room had been transformed into a mourning hall. At the center stood a simple wooden coffin, polished but unadorned, placed on two low wooden supports. The air was heavy with the thick smoke of incense, curling lazily upward, staining the walls with its bitter scent. Around the coffin sat villagers and relatives dressed in white mourning robes, their heads bowed. The only sound was the occasional creak of the wooden beams and the muffled sobs of family members. Closest to the coffin sat Wu Chu, Lin's husband. He was 30-something, still young, but at that moment he looked like an old man. His shoulders slumped forward, his face hidden in his hands. The smell of incense clung to his clothes. He had not eaten properly in days. In the coffin, Lin lay as she had since the moment her body was returned from the hospital. Her face was pale, almost waxen. Her black hair, carefully combed and tied back, framed a forehead where someone had placed a cloth with dried medicinal herbs, a final gesture against the fever that had consumed her. The neighbors whispered prayers in hushed voices, their words barely audible over the crackling incense. Then, suddenly, a gasp. It came from an elderly woman sitting near the door. Her eyes had widened, her hand rising instinctively to her mouth. Everyone turned. The room froze. From inside the coffin, Lin's pale fingers gripped the wooden rim. Her body shifted. Slowly, impossibly, she sat upright. Her eyes fluttered open. They were clouded at first, then focused. She licked her cracked lips and, in a hoarse whisper, asked for water. A woman who had been still, lifeless, for 3 days, had just breathed again before the eyes of her family and neighbors. The villagers shrank back in fear. Some thought they were witnessing a miracle. Others whispered that it was an omen. But no one in that room knew yet. The woman who had risen from the coffin would never again be the Lin they once knew. Just 1 week earlier, Wu Chu had been on his bicycle, pedaling furiously down the dirt road that led home. The summer sun was merciless. Sweat poured down his back, soaking his cotton shirt. Normally, the road felt easy. He had ridden it countless times. But that day, it felt like every turn of the pedals was dragging him uphill with the load too heavy to bear. His wife's fever had worsened. The doctor had warned him she might not make it through the week. Wu's legs pumped harder, but still his body felt heavy, like he was carrying someone with him. Villagers working in the fields looked up as he passed. Some scowled, muttering under their breath. When he finally reached his home, he found Lin almost unrecognizable. The fever had burned her pale, her face slick with sweat. Her breathing came in shallow rasps. She was only 37, but she looked frail and small, her body sinking into the bed. Wu tried tea, soup, cool claws against her skin, but nothing helped. Over the next 3 days, she only worsened. By the third night, Wu knew he had no choice. He needed to get her to a hospital. With no car, he went to his neighbor's home in desperation. At first, the man looked at him with a strange, disapproving expression. But when Wu pleaded, tears in his eyes, saying his wife was dying, the man relented. Together, they lifted Lin's weak body and placed her onto the neighbor's donkey cart. The ride was long and uneven. Each bump in the road jolted her limp frame. Wu held her hand tightly, whispering to her, though she could barely respond. By the time they arrived at the hospital, she was nearly unconscious. Doctors worked frantically, but her condition deteriorated further. That night, she slipped into a coma. Hours later, her heart stopped and died. Her body was brought home and placed inside the coffin, as tradition required. For 7 days, it would remain in the family's living room until cremation. Relatives came to weep and pray. Friends offered condolences. By the third day, Wu's grief had settled into a hollow despair. He sat staring at the coffin, the incense smoke blurring his vision. Then Lin sat up. At first, everyone wanted to believe it was a miracle. Wu, trembling with joy, carried Lin from the coffin and laid her gently on their bed. He stroked her hair, whispering her name, tears rolling freely. Neighbors pressed into the doorway, some kneeling, others whispering prayers for protection. But as the hours passed, Wu noticed something unsettling. Her voice sounded different. When she spoke, it carried a new accent, sharper, more confident than her gentle tone before. Even the way she moved had changed. Lin had always walked with careful, deliberate steps, but now, when she stood, she walked briskly, faster than Wu himself. Within days, stranger differences appeared. Lin had never learned to read, yet now she picked up a Mandarin text and read it fluently. She even wrote down numbers in neat columns, explaining to him how accounts should be balanced. Bookkeeping, accounting, things she had never studied, she now spoke about with authority. Her habits shifted too. She pushed away bowls of meat with a firm shake of her head. "I don't eat that," she said, declaring herself a vegetarian. She stopped cooking entirely, a shock to Wu, who had always depended on her meals. Instead, she urged him to leave his engineering job and open a building material shop, something completely outside their life until then. Against all odds, the business prospered under her advice. The whispers in the village grew louder. Some called it a blessing, others muttered about possession. Wu, who had once felt joy at her return, now lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering who exactly had come back from that coffin. In 1962, curiosity reached beyond the village. Government officials, hearing of Lin's story, summoned her to an army hospital for examination. She walked into the building with her usual brisk steps, her head held high. Wu followed quietly behind, his heart pounding. The chief physician stepped forward to greet her. He was a middle-aged man, accustomed to commanding respect. But before he could even speak, Lin looked him directly in the eye and said a single word, "Uncle." The room stilled. Then she turned to the woman beside him, his wife. Lin's lips curved into a faint smile. "Auntie?" The couple froze, their faces drained of color. Before they could respond, Lin continued, "My name is Zhu Shua. I'm your niece." The words hit like a blow. Their niece had gone missing during the chaos of the Chinese Civil War, years before. She had vanished without a trace. Now, standing before them, this woman, once Lin Wong Yao, calmly claimed she was Zu Shua, explaining that she had been murdered by fishermen. Her spirit, she said, had lingered, restless, until it found a body to inhabit. Wu stood in stunned silence. The officials stared, caught between disbelief and unease. At first, many dismissed her as delusional, but then she began naming details. She described family ties, small habits, personal moments only Zhu would have known. She spoke of favorite foods, simple vegetarian dishes. She explained her skill with numbers, her knowledge of bookkeeping. Even her accent matched. Piece by piece, her story lined up with what the physician and his wife knew to be true. Authorities tracked down the fishermen she accused. Only one remained alive. Under questioning, the old man's face fell. He confessed. They had killed Zhu. He himself had tried to stop it, but failed. The case, once considered an unsolved disappearance, was reclassified as a murder, based solely on the testimony of a woman who had, by all accounts, been dead. It was only later that the final piece of the puzzle revealed itself. Neighbors recalled and admitted something strange about the day Wu had rushed home on his bicycle, desperate to reach Lin. They remembered watching him pedal furiously, his face red, sweat pouring down his neck. But they swore he hadn't been alone. They said they saw a woman, a stranger, riding on the back of his bicycle, sitting upright. Her dark hair streamed behind her, her posture unnervingly rigid. Wu was stunned when he heard this. He had felt something that day, yes, the terrible weight dragging him down, as if pulling another body. But he had seen no one. When he later told Lin, or rather Zhu, she gave a quiet, steady answer. She said she had been there. Her spirit had clung to Wu's bicycle as he raced home, waiting for the moment his wife's body would give out. When Lin's life slipped away, Zhu stepped in. From that moment forward, Lin Wong Yao was no longer Lin. She lived openly as Zhu. She embraced the identity fully, never wavering in her claim. And the village accepted it. Over time, whispers of suspicion softened into respect. People began to seek her out for advice, for guidance. She became a leader in the community, known not for the woman she had been, but for the woman she had become. Her life stretched on for decades. She saw her village change, saw generations grow. And in 2018, at the age of 97, she died once more. At her funeral, the banners did not settle for a single name. They carried both, Lin Wong Yao and Zu Shua. For Wu, what haunted him most was not the miracle of her return, nor even the strangeness of her transformation. It was that single bike ride, the memory of his legs trembling, the invisible weight pressing down, the way neighbors stared as though they saw something clinging to him that he himself could not. Was it grief playing tricks on him? A shared hallucination? Or had he unknowingly carried another woman's spirit into his home that day? Even now, decades later, the story divides people. Some believe it was the clearest proof of reincarnation ever recorded. Others dismiss it as folklore. But one fact remains, carved into the memory of everyone who witnessed it. The woman who rose from that coffin lived the rest of her life as someone else.